Hey, welcome to the Gospel and Race podcast YouTube channel, where we create space to have the meaningful conversations and discernment around the church and race. I'm Greg Armstrong, your host. I'm so glad to be on this journey with you. I want to ask you to do a couple things for me. I want you to subscribe to this channel, jump into the conversation, leave some comments. I also want you to hit the notification button so that you know when we are live or when we have posted new content. We are going to engage this powerful conversation of the church and race and see the kingdom of God reconcile all nations. Let's go, the Gospel and Race podcast. Yo, welcome back. We're doing another podcast.
Oh, yeah.
Man, we in here, man. And look, we are tackling the best we can the issues of race and injustice and the church needing to lean into this conversation like never before. Yeah. This is the Gospel and Race podcast with yours truly, Greg Armstrong. I got my boy in the room.
Oh, yeah.
I had to pull him. I had to see if he had come down here from Northwest Indiana.
Yeah.
Had to pull him from Indiana.
Took that drive.
Which is really just like, Chicago.
Right.
We really true about it.
Right.
But Isaac Robinson,
What's
everybody.
going on,
Y'all give it up.
Hey.
Isaac Robinson.
To be here.
How you doing, bro?
I'm doing good, man. I am excited. When I first saw that you were doing this podcast, I was like, oh, yeah. Love you, man. Love your ministry. And so I was like, this is a great conversation, and he's a great guy to be leading. So I am super excited to be with you. And congrats on your degree, man.
Yeah, man.
Congrats.
We finished up.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, no more reading. Well, I got to still read. I guess I got to lead a church. but no more reading for academics' sake for a while. But I appreciate that, man.
No problem,
and I'm a major fan of yours, man.
Oh,
I mean, like, this dude, this is the Renaissance dude. You understand? Worship leader, pastor. Then you turn on Instagram, he preaching you under the table. It's like, man, come on, man.
A little bit.
And I'm just grateful for the work that you're doing with my great buddy Sam Hampshire and Taylor Hampshire in Northwest Indiana at Anthem Church.
Oh, yeah.
What's your role there? Like your official
worship
role?
pastor.
The worship pastor at Anthem Church. And Anthem Church is like, I don't know. Anthem Church is starting to be like what everybody's church wants to be. Just they were this humble church, just doing the thing, and then all of a sudden, boom! Just God just starts touching that. And I have a lot of thoughts on why that is. Not only because of the humility of the leadership at Anthem Church and how I love Sam and Taylor, but also the pieces that have come around them, like yourself as a worship pastor, and have created a culture in that church that's just God-centered, man. And so I love the music with Anthem Collective. I love the songwriting. I'm just a fan, bro. So I'm glad you're here.
Glad to be here. Thank you, man.
Good, man. And we're gonna talk about worship. We felt like we did a conversation on worship a few episodes ago.
By the way,
thanks, man. With Jackie Owens, which is awesome.
Great songwriter.
And I said we gotta keep talking about it because we appropriate race and culture with the church planting world and with the social construct. But the music, in my opinion, is a huge part. Now, we did come to a conclusion from a sociologist, and I'll drop his name because I forgot it off the top of my dome, that multi-ethnic congregations are really shaped by not just the music style. That is not even what shapes it, but it is the diversity of the culture of the actual team. Like what's represented there. Not tokenism. Right. But what's represented there is what builds community and actually pours over into making it a multi-ethnic. So anyways, y'all check that podcast out. But I'm with Isaac today, and we're going to continue this conversation on worship and multi-ethnic and race and all that. So listen, tell us a little bit about you, bro. Like, where you from? What's your deal? What you up to?
Yeah, well, very, very long story short. I moved here about 4 years ago from Louisiana on a word from the Lord, one of those crazy faith stories where, it's in the middle of chaos and you go, okay, Lord, what is this? I feel a call to move to, at the time, I thought it was Chicago. It was just Chicago. Didn't know anybody, didn't have any leads. Just put 2 weeks in at my job and found some peace and moved out here. And so got connected to Sam. And at the time, it was another church, or same church, just under a different name. We're a campus of another church. And so joined, took a part-time position. Within 2 weeks, it became full-time, and we've just been running ever since. And so, yeah, it's been crazy. Probably the craziest, heaviest position I've ever had. Before then, I've never worked in a church before this.
Oh, you didn't? You weren't on the church that?
In the where I came from, there was no, you didn't work in church. You just went to church. I'm a pastor's kid, so I've been in church all my life.
You've been working all your life.
You just go to church. And so when I moved out here, I was like, I'm gonna just find a regular job and find a church and serve. And then they were like, well, you can like be paid to like do what you do. And I'm like, no way. And then so just started getting connected in those areas and gotten, like I said, gotten that position and been running ever since, man. I've been able to do some really, really cool things, some really, really God things that only he could have brought about.
Let's go.
And so so that's a little bit of who I am. Do all the things, play a little bit, sing a little bit,
musician,
preach a little bit.
A little bit. Get out of here a little bit.
Jack of all trades, I just do what needs to be done.
Bro, you're a gift. And I love it, man. I came to Anthem last year during my sabbatical. So I got to come back during my sabbatical next month. And man, y'all I just love what's been being built there, and the focus on worship, and the diversity, the multi-ethnicity, is absolutely powerful. And I'm just thankful that God brought you to the season. It's funny, it's funny where I'm from Chicago, but I didn't know that churches like hired worship leaders full time. And so it was my buddy, my good friend Corey Pelly. I was going to his church in Rockford, just every now and then, just hanging out with him during the day. And I'm thinking like, this just must be a break for him.
Right.
And so he's writing songs in his office, and I'm in uniform because I'm going to work. In Jesus' name. and I asked Corey. I said, "Well, when do you go to work?" He said, "I'm at work." I said, "You at work? Like for the church?"
Crazy.
He's like, "Yeah, I'm at work I work for the church. I write songs. I run a team." And that's when he spoke to me, bro. And he said, "Man, you're gonna do this." And he just began to prophesy over me. And he said, "You're gonna do this for a living," and yada yada yada. So I share the same sort of narrative, and that I was just trying to hang. I didn't know we could do it for a living, right?
Just trying to hang.
And so you're a songwriter as well. And
songwriter. It's crazy. Started doing music like in college. And then just kind of kept with it just throughout. I've always just loved music, loved producing music, loved writing it. And tried my best to kind of like stick my toe in the industry, and then I was like, I don't want to do this. You know what I'm saying? To try to be an artist in that fashion. I was like, at the time, I was like, it's not for me. But I just kept writing, kept putting out stuff just because I love to do it. And that's just kind of always been the base of like my music, to just put it out for my friends. Like, y'all think this cool? Cool. All right. That was enough. But then once I got to Anthem and the pandemic came, it was actually a crazy thing, man. Our first service as a church was online, and we literally had to come up with something to do every week. And that's really where I have a great team, Anthem Collective. We have a great team. Kayla Thomas, Christian Black, just great people around us. And so we just kind of got in the mode, and every week we were literally just going to Christian's house, doing something different. And then I found out that they could write too. So I was like, well, we should write some songs. And so we started writing songs, and that's what we've been doing. And it's been crazy. We wrote Jesus Did It, which kind of took off a little bit for us, and we were not expecting that at all. And we'll talk about when we talk about multi-ethnic, how that song came about, and just writing for the church in general. But so now we are just pushing in. It's one of those things where we know God's on it. It's not in our own strength. We're not trying to be famous or anything. We just want to serve actually our church. So that's why we write. So we want to serve our church well, to speak to our context and the testimonies for our people, and put those into songs that they can sing, that it can mean something to them. And so, and we share it with the world. If anybody loves it too, great. You know,
rock with
but
it. So that brings us a good point about context, because here's what I want to talk about. I believe that multi-ethnic worship, if we want to call it that, multi-ethnic worship needs to really embody the context.
Yeah.
And I think it needs to sing the stories of the people represented.
Yeah.
It needs to sing the narrative of the people represented.
Yeah.
And so Anthem is a multi-ethnic church. I mean, when I was there, I saw everything from white, black, Hispanic, and other. Now, it is questionable, and this is the joke with Anthem and Sam, my boy. It's questionable if he's white.
Right.
But
he is. If you ask him, he's black.
Yeah, you see what I'm saying? So it's questionable, but it's led by white pastors, and Sam and Taylor. So you have this space where you need to be leading, cultivating, writing for multi-ethnic. So would you agree multi-ethnic songwriting is the embodiment of the context that's present? And what would you add to that?
I agree wholeheartedly, and I think I know you guys were talking about this a little bit with Jackie just on the podcast about worship before, but just plainly, there are just some songs that are not our context and just sometimes don't make sense.
They don't fit.
They don't fit to who we are. And so if we only have 3% of the churches writing for the rest of the church in total, then we're not going to get the full expression of who the churches are locally.
Right.
And so I think it is important that churches find songs or write songs that make sense for their context and who they are. And it's another way to represent who you have in your local assembly.
That's good. That's good. And so here's what we should lean into. We posed this article a few episodes ago about the top 4 to 5 mega churches, mostly white, affluent, represent like the top 20 to 30 songs on the charts,
which is crazy,
more than likely being sung by the majority of churches, especially multi-ethnic churches, but being sung by the majority of churches. So here's my question, and this could seem a little controversial to some, but I want to talk about it because I think the church needs to deal with it. With all of the disparities revolving around these same churches, because not all of them, but we know the Hillsong documentary dropped recently. We know Bethel's sort of like one-sided political affiliation, all these things. Here's my question. Should we be singing these songs? Yes or no, or maybe? And I'll kick it off by asking you that, and I want to share some thoughts on it myself.
I think that it's tough. I think you just have to be, again, intentional with which I would ask this question regardless of who the song is coming from.
Right.
Is this impactful in bringing in the presence of the Lord for our congregation?
Sure.
And so, there might be times where if this song represents an organization that is, let's for a Hillsong joint, we might pull back on some of those, just because a lot of people don't have the knowledge of like where the separation is between the songwriters and the songs and the actual church. They don't really know that, so they just see Hillsong. That song is from Hillsong, and like those two are just connecting, and that is what it is. And so to even just use wisdom and go, well, first of all, I don't want people thinking about the breakdown of Hillsong while we're trying to worship. Right. So I might just negate that from the jump. But I think that what that does is it should bring, again, some intentionality just overall with worship leaders, worship pastors. Is okay, like we're seeing some of the dark closets of the process in which this music is made. And so now we're seeing that like, oh, this, like, it was a formula, and it wasn't necessarily about this offering unto God, but it was more so like, let's make something that we know will work, that hits. And so I think that I would hope that actually brings worship pastors and worship leaders to take and to go, okay, well, what are we really doing? Like, what are we putting these songs in the set for? If it's to worship God and to be in his presence, then, and if we know that some of these songs weren't made necessarily with that in mind, but they were made for maybe industry success or whatever, just another whatever, then we go, okay, well, let's just try to find some groups or some other songs that seem to have a different motive that they were written in.
And it's a paradox, right? Because some of it could be, I'm not going to use this music because of what I know the intent behind or the history behind it or even the organization behind it represents, right? But then at the same time, there's this weird paradox of like, God can use anything. Right? It's like, in a moment, I think about the dude, I forgot his name, who wrote Healer, right? You remember that?
Yes.
Some years ago when he was faking his sickness. He was like wearing I don't mean to laugh at
play
dude,
with God, man. I don't understand it.
I'm just saying, like, he wrote Healer. He was up there like with the tubes in his head. But the weird thing about God is that we sang that back in the day, man. It just rested upon the congregation, and people actually experienced the presence of God in a way. So you're right in that. Like, I think what you're saying is we need to have like worship pastors and leaders who are discerning regardless. Who are discerning about what kind of music we're bringing into a congregation. Is this music? Was it written fake? Could God still use it? But then also the race implications of it. Does this music speak to our context, or are we just trying to appropriate a cultural language upon a congregation where that language is it doesn't make sense, right? And this happened in like, to my knowledge, in like the mid to late 90s, where black churches started adopting these songs from white writers. And so we're talking about like the flowers in the field, and like we ain't got no flowers in the front yard, it's like we're talking about the smell of the air. We're talking about God as this this enveloping nature of his Father, Daddy, Son. And the reality was black congregations didn't know how to translate that type of theology in music, right? And so how important then is our theology and lyric as it comes to race, ethnicity, and justice even? You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. I think that we did see some of that. And, we've seen like social media and jokes about the difference between white church worship and black church worship. But I think even when we talk about lyrics for songs, like we see that on the other side too, because, there'll be gospel songs where the subject or the emphasis is on how God can bring us out or bring us through, and how there's breakthrough.
It's liberation language.
Liberation language. And like other churches, they don't need it.
My bills paid.
Bills are paid. The car's tank is full, and we're fine. So I actually don't need
that's good.
the Lord to come through. And so there's that on that side. And so I think that obviously within the context of your church and where you are, but there has to be some way where you bring everything back to the center of who God is.
Period.
And that has to be enough. And so like even when we're talking about lyrics and songs and stuff, I find myself even now like looking at some of the me-centered songs that have been in some of our sets for a while that were more towards our feelings and how it makes us feel, and I kind of look at that and go, are we singing to God, or are we kind of just
what's going on here? Are we like working out some sort of like some sort of therapy?
Are we or like it's a song, which is cool, but it's this like worship. And
Right.
obviously,
Is it
like
worship?
we know what worship really is. Like it's not the slow song in our set.
Yeah.
Like we know that.
Yeah.
But it's like, okay, well, what do we have that actually can unify us
Yeah.
on both ends to where everyone feels represented,
Yeah.
and everybody has their space to connect with God in that way, and then we take that intentionality, and then we look at our context and go, okay, well, then how can we take that and make it fit for who we are and where we are? And that just goes into the methodology of how we do it,
Right.
the
right.
arranging of our songs and things like that,
Yeah.
because we don't ever want to take away our flavor and who we are. Just have a central our central context, which is Jesus.
Yep.
Putting all eyes on him, and then using who we are to kind of flavor that in a sense.
That's good. So tell me about like Anthem Collective.
Yeah.
It's a multi-ethnic
Yeah.
church congregation. What are themes? So if if someone's watching this and they're like, we either have a multi-ethnic church or we're looking to sort of transform into multi-ethnic, what are some of the themes along that line that you keep sort of at the baseline? We know it's contextual in terms of geography and all that, but what are some of the themes that you keep in front of the church?
So what we keep at the front of the church, and just growing in where we've been, I'm learning to be even more and more intentional about this, because we understand that like the lyrics in our songs shape what we believe.
Yeah, say that.
Right.
Yeah.
And so people
That's a
will
word.
people will sing more in faith than what they can say. You know?
Yep. Yep.
And so obviously, first and foremost is Jesus, like who he is and what he's done, and what that means for our lives. And so really like trying to take the consumerism out of it, where everything is pointed to what can we give him in this space? How can we worship in this context, which is the giving of our lives? How can we sing that? How can we say that in different ways here? So that's always at the forefront.
Yeah.
It's actually, to be honest, it's like the only thing that's at the forefront.
Yeah.
And so like that's literally the one filter that we use. Like, do we get to sing to Jesus, about Jesus, or like are we singing just about our strength and things like that?
Yep.
So that's always at the forefront. And then, but more practical ways is that we are very intentional about bringing every genre into what we do. And we make no bones about it. I tell every person who joins the worship team that we are multi-everything, multi-ethnic, multi-class, all of that. And so we're going to sing multi-everything. So yes.
So y'all doing it all.
We're doing it all. So yes, if you join this team, you're going to have to learn how to sing a gospel song. No matter what you are.
Yeah.
And yes, when you join this team, we're going to sing some CCM joints.
Yeah. Yeah.
No matter who you are.
No matter who you are.
And
is that difficult to keep, like, because most in multi-ethnic churches, a lot of teams just really, they end up leaning on was our team does this, our team does a phenomenal job. But even for me, you know, we kind of do everything, and then we just really kind of lean in to what, you know, we gonna be more this. Yeah. But we always have to check that gauge.
We're always, and so I think that's obviously, you know, if you do our services by every week, that's a week by week thing. So we'll look at, okay, well, what did we sing last week? You know, look at the writers of the song, like who have we been singing? You know, does that need to change up a bit? Is it time for us to write a song? You know, because we've just been doing a lot of,
that's good, bro.
A lot of other things. Is there anything that we feel we want to say that we can't find a song to say? Okay, well, let's write it. And so is it hard? Yes, but I think it's always going to be hard, because it's a tension that as a multi-ethnic church, we're always going to have to deal with. So I tell them we're not going to have everything for everybody, but we are going to have something for everybody. We're going to have something. So you might not like you might not like song 1. You might not like song 1. Song 2 or song 3, you're going to find your space in there somewhere. But in the midst of that, through what we sing, through what we preach and how we interact, you're actually going to learn that it's actually not about what you prefer.
Do you see? That's good, man. I'm encouraged by that because sometimes there's that imbalance.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I found in multi-ethnic churches, and we're complicit of this too in our church.
Oh, we are too.
It's kind of like, hey, we've been singing that stuff long enough.
Yeah,
Y'all about to get this gospel smoke.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And you're going to deal with it.
Yeah.
Right? But you said something that intrigued me. You even look at the writers.
Yeah.
And I wonder from like even a race perspective.
Yeah.
Do you see like, hey, we've been singing songs from X writers, and we do this in academia, right?
Yeah.
Like we critique syllabi to say, all right, if we're learning about theology and all of the books that we got to study are from white theologians, and there are no women theologians, and there are no black theologians or Hispanic or then we are getting a malnourished version of a theological lens.
Yeah.
Because we're not willing to diversify the voices that we allow to speak into our craft. And so in the same way, you're saying that with music, which I think is dope. I think we need to start doing this. We're going to look at the songwriters. We may even love the song.
Yeah.
But if all our songs are by all black songwriters or all white songwriters, are we really displaying a multi-ethnic ecclesiology?
Yeah.
That's good.
And even, again, you guys talked about this on the last pod, but even it takes work to dig past what's popular. to go
say it.
Like, looking at the top or whatever, or it doesn't even have to be the top. It's just like what's hot right now.
It's easy.
It's very easy to hear a song and go, oh yeah, that would go. So that'll work. For that's a great one song, or that's a great middle song. But it takes work to seek out other groups or other writers or other songs that can speak maybe a little bit better to the context, to maybe the theme or whatever you're trying to convey. So that takes intentionality and it takes work. So you can't be lazy when you do that. You can't just rely on just what's being presented to you. And so, you got to dig through Loop community and the multi-tracks and the gospel side of it and see like, okay, like who are these people that I don't know? Yeah. Like I will just go listen. It's crazy. That's a part of my job. It feels weird. Part of your job is to go and listen for songs.
Go and listen and find songs.
But I'll just go through. I don't know any of these people, but what are their songs speaking?
This is so synonymous to the work of multi-ethnic ministry, period. Yeah. And here's where people fail in multi-ethnic. Multi-ethnic, whether it's church planting, music, small groups or whatever, takes work. It takes another level of digging. Yeah. It takes getting away from the assumptions. Yeah. And it takes an effort that a lot of people are not willing to do. Yeah. And that's why we end up being in these monocultural spaces. Yeah. Because if I'm the worship pastor of a multi-ethnic church, but my bent is gospel music, then it's just easier for me to say, hey, y'all gonna get this gospel. This is who I am. Yeah. And we've talked about this before. There's a difference between affirming who an individual is, and that said individual not actually doing the work of representing a congregation fully. You understand what I'm saying? Yeah. So I've critiqued folks who use black worship leaders as their source of music, simply because they wanted this tokenism, this space kind of open up for their church. Yeah. However, if you are a black worship leader or in a multi-ethnic space, it takes a little work, man, to dig and look at songwriters and look at genres and consider like what is going to fit, or to know the stories of the congregation to even know what to sing, what to write. Because in multi-ethnic settings, the story is king. Yeah. The story of this affluent businesswoman, black businesswoman, worshiping next to, the white dude that just serves coffee every week, right? You know what I mean? Two different worlds, but God has joined us together. We got to write songs and find songs to appropriate that.
Yeah, which it's glad that you brought that up. We say this about our church, and it's not cliche for us. It's just what we try our best just to live out as a church, which is simply the fact that we are everything. Like we're not lying. Like we have that in our church. We have people who work downtown.
Yep.
And we got folks who like don't know where the next is coming from. Like that's just a real thing.
Yep.
And so when we say we all come under the same banner of Jesus Christ, it's the fact that we all need a savior.
Yeah.
We all need Jesus.
That's right.
Like it doesn't matter who you are, what you are, our need is still for Jesus to be in our lives. And so what's funny is that we have the job of singing and finding songs to all of that. So we're going to find songs that speak about our need to come out of comfort.
Yeah.
And we're going to write songs about satisfaction, about being fulfilled by Jesus alone, because we know we have people who are fulfilled, who have the opportunity to be fulfilled by other things, by their wealth, by their comfort.
That's good, bro.
So now we get to sing those songs, and we also know that we have people who are in need of healing, of whatever.
Yep.
So we're going to sing these songs. And though that might not be so, though you might not need breakthrough,
right?
We have sang and taught through our church that though you may not need it, you are connected to the body. And what does the Bible tell us? That we celebrate when other people celebrate. We mourn when people mourn. And so this is like grown up Christianity.
Yeah.
This is grown up Christianity. And even I know we're talking about worship, but one of the things that I'm really big on in our team is our community. Yeah. So what we do on stage is actually kind of like the lowest of the totem pole of how we should be interacting and how we should be in relation. And you spoke to that. I think that's a little bit from the quote that was mentioned a bit. Like it's actually the relationships that make it work. Yeah. And so like what we do on stage, it matters. And I agree we should have quality. I was like, nah. Give me the quality. It's got to sound good.
Although he was just saying like, according to his study, like, people didn't care.
Yeah, I mean, I get that. I'm just one of the ones who would care.
Me too, bro.
But that's actually at the low. That cannot be the only denominator of why we're together.
Sure. Yeah, that's right.
So we make sure that we have team nights, and I make sure you come. And I press you when you don't.
Yeah.
Why? It's because these are people that we need to be in relationship with.
Yeah.
And it needs to be in your actual life. So that when we're on stage and we're singing these songs, we actually mean it.
Dude, that's
that we
so
actually
good,
have
man.
evidence. And that we're not just singing pipe dreams.
Yeah. Man, you said something. I'm framing this whole, my worship team's in trouble because we're going to frame this whole situation, which they're doing a phenomenal job.
Yeah.
Shout out to Shamar. She's just killing it. But you mentioned how different representation in the church calls for a different voice or lyric.
Yeah.
And the picture that I got was this, like the woman who doesn't need breakthrough, you can still sing and intercede for the one who does.
Yeah.
So like you don't have to sit this one out.
No, you don't.
You know what I'm saying? That's powerful, ain't it?
Yeah.
Like he needs breakthrough and you don't, but we're gonna sing it together because my affirmation of that need and my intercession is gonna help you get just what you need.
Yeah.
And vice versa. And that is the beauty, in my opinion, of a multi-ethnic, multi-class, multi-situation, right? Because that goes beyond race and color, but it does really steep us in race and color because, if you have a church that has different assumptions about color, socioeconomic, poverty versus not, then all those people being in the room together, you got to speak to all of it.
Yeah.
But you don't have to be isolated in
No,
any
you
other.
don't.
You know what I'm saying? So that's. I just wanted to I had to talk that one out for me, so that we can appropriate that to our context.
Yeah. Because people don't come in with that.
Right.
You have to be taught that.
You got to be taught that.
You have to learn that. You have to grow in that. That's not just something you come in with and go, oh, I can engage with all of this, even though it might not speak to this portion or this lyric might not speak to me personally.
Yeah.
Which again, we sing what we believe.
Yeah.
And so, and that even goes into like, your role as a worship pastor or your role as a worship leader. If you have the ability, to speak, or because some places they're like, man, don't talk, just sing.
Just sing.
We don't need you. We don't need you preaching up there.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying you got to sing a sermon every time you lead. I'm not saying that either. But even as a leader, as a pastor, if you're not intentional,
you can't expect anybody.
You can't expect anybody else to know that or to learn that. So you've got to know it, learn it, and put it into practice yourself.
So speaking of songs, like what we give the congregation to sing, especially multi-ethnic congregations, I'm gonna make a confession on just some problems I've had with appropriating music from other cultures into our multi-ethnic space. And this is just me, something that
Buckle
I've got
up,
to do.
guys.
And while I do believe that God could take a song that was written by a certain person and because let me say this before I make my point. In the black music culture, we understand that the majority of our staple songs were written by imperfect people.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
I can leave it at that. Those
Yeah.
imperfections are
Yeah,
left
yeah.
to your imagination, but we
they're
know,
very real.
You know what I mean? They're very real.
Very real.
And we all are sinful people. We
Yeah,
all are
yeah,
born
yeah.
and sin. But in terms of like the ethics or the morality of some that have penned some of our strongest music in the black culture, we all know. Like the elephant in the room. Like we know who he is.
We know what that was.
So you know what I mean? So we know what that is. So I don't want to ever act like we
know who
can't take
David
a
was.
song. We know who David. Let's go back to David.
Come on, man. Like,
we know who he was.
it's nothing new.
So there's nothing new under the sun as it relates to that. I personally had a lot of struggles with when I began to find out that our major songwriters, like those with Hillsong and with Bethel and others, had major disparities when it came to like race and injustice and those stories that were coming out of that.
Yeah.
And so for me as a black man, I started to think to myself, I don't want to sing your music. I don't want to sing your music when the appropriation of like racial injustice is evident, or like with like Bethel making their hard stance to like the Republican right.
Yeah.
Not that black folks don't do that with, you know what I mean?
Right.
So don't get me wrong. But for me, I was just like you've politicized the movement that at one point for
Wasn't
me
about that.
was just such a movement of revival. And now you've chosen to take this side in the worst polarizing season of our country in my generation.
Yeah.
Then I honestly started looking at their songs like, I'm good. I don't get Holy Spirit, you welcome, but
Yeah. That's it.
that's it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? What you got any thoughts on that? I'm confessing here.
Yeah. I'll say it was definitely tough. And what made it kind of worse was like there was a part of me that's like, I'm actually not surprised.
Yeah. Yeah.
But all of that aside, I think that there was, and I'll confess to it, just as a human being, being a black man, where it's like, all right, yeah, maybe I am kind of like straight on you, a little bit. But I think for me, it wasn't maybe as difficult to split from that and any music that I feel is still worth singing, or worth presenting. And so it wasn't. It's not like a huge thing, but it also is like I'm still side-eyeing y'all though.
Right.
I'm still kind of side-eyeing y'all, and I understand people have the right to affiliate with who they want to. At the end of the day, like, that's y'all's decision on whatever you. What I didn't like was, and we talked about the appropriation. That's not the only space that we've seen it. We just heard about it in the Hillsong doc as well. Where it's like, hey, we don't see black leadership. It's like, all right, we'll let y'all come up and do the offering for 3 but for 3 Sundays, but y'all won't be up here again. And like it just kind of faded. And I think we saw some of that from other spaces too, where y'all put that big choir up there, you put a black person on the keys, and y'all sang more gospel songs for like a Sunday.
Yep.
And a year later, y'all ain't did it since.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, what was the point? Were you just trying to PR your image, or did you really try to have? And I don't know, we're not there, but like,
exactly.
We can only judge by what we see, and that might not be a good thing. So we take everything with a grain of salt. But like at the end of the day, that is what we saw. We saw you put up things that you thought would cater to a black community more, and then once the heat got turned down, we didn't see it again.
Yeah, and the connection to this is these top 30 songs.
Yeah.
You being the representation of those, and many of
and
us,
singing
whether
your
white,
songs
black,
in our church.
Yeah, white, black, or multi-ethnic, we're all singing that music.
Yeah.
And they can't help who sings what music, right? So I don't know if they said, hey, we're writing these songs for every color, nation, tribe to sing. They may not have even cared, whatever the case may be. But what we do know is they're all benefiting from it financially, right? So it's like, So my thing is, when the whole thing happened with William Matthews, that all these kind of offshoots that you kind of start looking at and saying, all right, what's going on here? Like what's going on with appropriation? What's going on with the conversation of like multi-ethnic to the degree of like you know what I mean? Like you have some representation. So like you to some degree value the voice of a person of color, but at the same time, like you said, like it's kind of only in spurts.
Yeah.
And again, I've always preached this. I don't think every church should be multi-ethnic. I don't think every church should be, there's going to be some homogenous churches. There's some powerful white churches, powerful black churches, and there are communities that don't call for multi-ethnic church planting or music. So I'm not getting into that, but I do think we need to start thinking about not so much for Bethel, Hillsong, and all that. The churches that are multi-ethnic to start making decisions. Yeah. To say, am I appropriating the dominant cultural songwriting ethic to a context where it's not going to fit?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or will I then begin to just begin to foster music within my context that actually works? And whether you affiliate with a political party outrightly or not, or whether you have a scandal and the whole thing is crumbling down or not, whatever the case may be, I don't have to have ill feelings towards that because I'm focused on my context. For sure. So I want to make sure Hillsong Bethel, I don't dislike it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I just bought into it.
Yeah.
Because we all sing Holy Spirit. We all sang, we all sang these songs, and I bought into it, and I loved it, and I felt like this is a gift to the body, which it is. Yeah. But then openly, I'm like, come on, y'all. Y'all not doing that. Yeah. Y'all not doing that. And my own flesh was just like, I'm good on y'all.
Yeah.
I'm good on y'all.
And it's almost as if there wasn't and again, like we're not in those camps, so we don't know the full details. But I do think that when you get to that point, that whether you want to or not, there is some responsibility to steward well the influence that you have.
Yeah.
And I feel like some of that kind of feels short as well.
Yeah. Well, we got love for them. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
We still gonna rock some of this stuff. All right. So I want to ask this question though. So in terms of like multi-ethnic race, another confession I have. Okay, I got all kind of confessions today, don't I? Another confession I have is, so I've seen in some majority white spaces that they cater to their audience is, white church.
Yeah.
But then they open up another audience of persons of color with just items. Like for instance, I was watching Furtick, who I love, and he has a dude on B3 backing him up.
Yeah.
And I felt some kind of way about that. I know this is flesh. You know what I'm saying? I'm just trying to be honest with you. But I was thinking to myself, like, maybe because as a church planter, I was still waiting on a keyboard player for my church.
Yeah.
I'm like, God, if I don't care who they are. If they can just play a couple songs, I'll take them. And then I'm looking and I'm thinking to myself, like, man, like for me, that's a cultural frame from the black church that I don't know if you really like that or not.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? That's all I'm saying. Do you really like that? Or are you using that as an appropriation tool to grab a larger audience? Now, in his defense, he got close to John P. Key and a lot of gospel artists and a lot of influence. He's preaching at Jake's church, the whole 9 yards. So the dude's got real relationships. I'm sure sanction some of these things to say, all right, that won't be too crazy if you do it. But for me, I was thinking, like, I would love for that to really be a genuine part of you, which I hope it is, and not just sort of an appropriation thing to really make persons of color feel comfortable or whatever the case may be. You got any thoughts on that? As I'm spilling my guts about all my fleshly, sinful antagonisms that I've had with white church culture.
I think I would just echo that. You would hope that it comes out of an authentic place from relationships. And I mean,
and it probably does.
It probably does, but there are maybe other spaces where that may not be the case. But yeah, I would say, man, I just hope that you authentically love it because for what it is. That is from you. Like, I know Sam, he jokes all the time of, like, he wishes he had like a B3 organ, but I know that, like, it's not just so that he can rile up black people in our church for it to be well. He just really wants an organ. Like, he thinks it would be dope. But here's the thing, is that if you're going to go that route, I feel like as long as you are going to be authentically you, and that you're going to bring whatever that is, just to help, just to celebrate that context and not use it as a downplay, as not like a caricature type of thing. So, like, example, like Sam, he probably would love to have a Hammond, but he wouldn't try to tune up.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right,
like,
that'd be a step.
It would be like, okay, but, like, that's not you. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, that's not a part of who you are. But if you use it in a way that celebrates it for what it is.
Because on the flip side, I worked for a Pentecostal denomination. And every white pastor that came in the church, like when I was playing for this church, bro, we had like a Yamaha, like, you know, keyboard or piano, and every one of them, they came from like deep South Pentecostal church. I mean, they church.
Plays, brother.
Yeah, bro, you ain't ready for these white preachers, Pentecostal white preachers from the South. And they came in, he was preaching in the middle of his preaching. He came over to me, he said, "Hey, you got an organ on that keyboard?" I said, "Well, I come from organ, so it's not gonna sound like organ." He didn't care. He said, "Turn that organ on." I turned that organ on. He hopped on the chairs. He flipped across, and all the black people were like, "We ain't ready." So but culturally though, that's
it makes sense for them.
And that's why I want to, like, really give love and be honest about, like, Furtick's from the South, right? He's from South Carolina. And he perhaps has experienced that type of ecclesiology and church, and probably always dreamed about one day when I have a church, I'm going there.
I'm gonna do that.
I'm going there. But without that kind of history, somebody like me in the midst of the struggles of race in our country, and my first thought was like, dude, what you doing with that organ up there on the stage? You know what I mean? But that's the beauty of I think. Just multi-ethnic connection. Like, we could, we've done things from other cultures that otherwise we
all
would.
The time.
You know what I'm saying? And while we can live in harmony with each other and say, let's create worship experiences that I didn't think would work in my context, but it does help other cultures feel a part.
It's funny that you brought that up. Even you're talking about. Like from the South and the musicians, like, I know that, and so like if you couldn't play a shout like you was off the keys. Like, you got to go. We need somebody who can.
No matter what color you.
No matter what color. If you can't keep up, you got to go. I think the issue is when, obviously, people will look at maybe that culture, that context, and diminish it as if it's not worth the value of experiencing like something else, like another side. So that's what I mean, but like using that like a caricature, like, don't talk about it if you're going to speak down on it. Where I come from in the South, we had all the things. So I was able to grow as a worship leader really in all the spaces. So I can go to a Baptist church and tune up. I can go to a non-denominational and lay on the floor. And like, I learned how to do all those things. But if you're not willing to put your preferences down and acknowledge that even if I might not get with that, it's just a preference thing. It's not a value thing on what that is. So so I may not get down with like the gospel choir. Like, I might love a praise team or whatever, but I'm not going to say that that's less than this.
Right.
You have to be mature to say, oh, that's probably just a preference thing, but for the sake of unity, for the sake of who we're worshiping, I can lay my preference down and still join in and still appreciate and not have to devalue that and think that it's less than.
That's a good
point. Unless like, and I'm not saying like you got to accept everything, like, because we all know preachers who like hoop and it's great, but then you listen to what they're saying, and it's like you're not actually talking about anything. So I'm not saying you have to, you know what I'm saying? So I'm not saying you just have to accept it. But what I am saying is that the solid stuff, like the people who Bishop Noel Jones, super sound theologically, and he's gonna teach you, and then he's gonna tune up, and it's gonna be great. But you can't say that is a lesser form of what we're supposed to be doing just because it doesn't line up with your preference. And if you're serious about living a multicultural, multi-ethnic life, then you have to even dig in even further and go, I may not prefer that, but let me find somebody who does and see why. Like, what does that do? What is that doing for you? And they could bring a story or a context where you go, oh, that makes sense. And you can learn to appreciate that, and you don't have to view it as something lesser than what you would experience somewhere else just because it's not your preference.
That's good, man. And dude, so when it comes to like the dynamic of, because I'm always thinking, because I lived in both worlds. I grew up in a classic missionary Baptist church in church. That was my world growing up, into this multi-ethnic thing. And we saw the progression of black churches more so wanting to be diversified. And I talked about this before. We changed the language in the songs because it was more heartfelt. It was, which was junk. But the white worship isn't superior because the language is different and more heartfelt. But we saw these.
And some of that stuff was not theologically right.
And it wasn't right. But we jumped from work it out to like whatever sounded like it was logical, right? And we said that's more sincere.
Yeah.
But you saw this progression even within the black church where we went from the choir to the praise team to the worship team.
Yeah.
And you saw this battle. I know you experienced this too. I don't know if it happened down in Louisiana, but you saw this battle between the black church was choir.
Yeah.
And we did 2-3 songs a week.
Yeah.
Maybe 4 because you got to sing the benediction and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Then the praise team got microphones. And it was that is more.
Some of them had both. So you had like a choir behind you. But the leads were kind of standing in front.
Right.
Yeah.
But here's my thought on this. And we began to appropriate culturally from other spaces what wasn't necessarily our dominant feature within our local expression of church. Yeah. Don't get me wrong. I know there were groups, the caravans and other. There were groups. But in terms of our church, our worship practices, we began to say, well, the worship team, that what they're doing is more important because it's worship than the choir, because the choir is singing "Work It Out." Yeah, and so you got these these cultural complexities going on here.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, and maybe someone would argue with me, but from my vantage point growing up in it, we were appropriating cultural nuances from other cultures, saying that, you know, in a sense, in some spaces, this idea of whiteness, which was, that's better.
Yep.
Like that's more sincere. The songs, it's worship, it's not choir.
Yep.
So let's begin to bring this in. So we brought this into the church. Now you got this thing between, like, we're the worship team and y'all the choir. And now, I don't know if you saw it in the churches, but we saw it, these complexities. And then, as of recent, COVID hit, they got rid of all the choirs, and now it's just worship teams. But now there's this reemergence of this classic form of worship expression, which is the choir. And we're starting to appreciate it more because it's something that we lost in the black church experience that now I think we need to regain. Any thoughts on that, or am I crazy?
No. You're absolutely correct. And I think just in the same way that we can bend, even in like our music selection. Same thing happens within our expressions. Like we just bent that way. And I think you don't really realize what you're missing until you check it out again, and it's like, oh, this actually does bring something different. We actually we started doing a mass choir at Anthem for that very reason.
Did you?
Yeah, we just wanted to. It was something to be celebrated. It was something that was needed.
It's like
because total praise doesn't sound the same when it's just 6 people on the mic.
Crazy?
You know what I mean? And it's like, but the first time we did a mass choir, like, it was crazy. But we realized that this brought a value beyond just the musical expression of what we could do. It was, now we have people who might not have and I'm not saying this is anybody from the mass choir, I'm not saying y'all can't sing, but like, you might have somebody who maybe not have like the skill necessary to hold a mic, but can serve
and be a part
in this space. And now we have an on-ramp for you to join the community.
Exactly.
And you get to, and man, I'm telling you, like, we had so much, it was like, it was just refreshing just to see. And we don't do that. And again, first of all, like, I'm not perfect, so like, I'm not saying like I got this whole thing like figured out.
Sure.
But like, we don't get that if we're not intentionally thinking, how are we best serving our people?
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
And not just, and that doesn't mean how can we make black people happy?
Right.
When I say how can we best serve our people, if we're about multi-ethnic, what's a efficient way that I can get a white baritone who just wants to sing next to this church mother who's been asking for a choir since I got here?
That's it. That's the messiness.
And so it's one thing to go, oh, that's a great idea. It's another thing to push past all of the barriers that might bring, all the setup we got to do, all the rehearsal's going to be different. Push past that and go, nah, this is actually worth it.
Yeah.
And that, I think if that's a great way to look at it, it's like, okay, well, is this a way that we can serve our people and allow them to serve one another?
That's good, man. That's good. And then we create this space, right, musically, where we are serving people with the language that they understand.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And not just forcing one language upon them.
And introducing a language or a way to people who maybe in any other space wouldn't have even known. I can't tell you how many times, this is kind of on subject, but I can't tell you how many white or non-black people who come up to me and they say, what are those songs that y'all sang? Not getting the list. And they're like, who's William Murphy? Who's Forward City? You're exposing them. And now they come back, they're like, man, it's all on my playlist. And like, would have never even found unless you exposed that to them. And that comes from a space of saying, this is actually valuable. This actually can speak to you if you just let it.
And so here's the beauty of like these cultures being presented, because I know I've been on a high horse about how we diminish the black church experience and the lyric and the theology that comes out of the black church, which is so necessary and so rich and so needed. So we did a choir too at our church several months ago, and we did what did we do? We did Percy Gray. Everybody clap your hand. And you listen to that song and you just kind of like, this is the way we praise him. There's no, we're not spewing any like doctrinal, theological, nothing. But man, I looked at the white people in our congregation and they just needed the simplicity of this posture of praise that comes from the richness of the black church. Yeah. You know what I mean? And even me, I said, man, I miss what is feeding me out of this music that I grew up and knew and have always had to lean into, because it's the richness of culture. It's the richness of theological expression that maybe other people don't understand or approve of. But in a multi-ethnic setting, we get to eat, green beans and what do they put, regular green beans or green beans with ham hock. You know what I mean? Like we get to, in a multi-ethnic church, we get to eat baked chicken and fried chicken. You know what I mean? And so that's the beauty of how we use music to actually serve a multi-ethnic people. And what it sounds like to me, what you're saying is, when like white parishioners ask you like, what's this song? We start entering into discipleship. Yeah. I got, one of our pastors here, older white guy, every Sunday he's walking in singing the whinings. Yeah. And it's for some reason these whinings are just tearing him up. And he's singing Donnie McClurkin, Speak to My Heart. He's, and he's just like, man, where has this been? Yeah. Like this is music. And that blessed me, because the assumption is that you wouldn't understand what that music's about. Right. But what God does is he takes that and we disciple each other in a way. You know what I mean? Oh yeah. We disciple each other in a way, even through music, multi-ethnic framing in music. So I think that's powerful. Yeah. So what are you telling worship leaders now? Like a worship leader who has the job of stewarding a multi-ethnic congregation musically. Yeah. Give me a couple things that you want to tell them. I want to end with this. I want to encourage worship leaders, songwriters too. Yeah. Here's some things that you need to be considering if this is your job.
For songwriters, don't lie. Yep. Write what's true for you and the word. Yeah. That's the easiest route for you to go. Yeah. The moment you begin to try to write for a hit, with whatever that is for you, or you try to write to what you think would work well outside of whatever, let your intention be to not lie. Yeah. And to tell the truth. Yeah. Of your context, of who you are, your story, or whatever story that you're writing for, whether that be the church or so don't lie. Tell the truth. And it's easy. Like, it'll make songwriting so much easier for you, because you won't have to try to conjure up something that you have no experience with. Yeah. Just write what you know, bro. And write from the word.
Don't money grab, right?
No, don't money grab. It's nothing. Yeah. Because first of all, if you're not built to be in that industry, even if you were to get there, if you're not built for it, it'll spit you out. Yeah. Yep. So, it's good. Your intention should be to write for your context, your people. For worship leaders, again, I'm not perfect, so it's kind of weird being like, hey, y'all should do this, when I'm like, I should do this. But I would just say, if you're singing to Jesus and you're bringing worship to him and not for yourself, it'll make a lot of things very easy. That's good. If you curate your set list to invoke the presence of God and to bless him and to minister to him, before you think about how the church is going to react, before you think about, is this fun for the musicians? All of that comes a little later. But I think your main intention should be, how can we really minister to Jesus this week in this way, in this context?
We need an altar call right there for all worship pastors, musicians, and worship leaders. Right on that word right there.
Yeah. And if you do that, obviously, all the intention that you need for the multi-ethnic will come out of that.
Yeah.
Because you'll look at black songs and white songs and go, this works.
Yeah.
This doesn't. This is a little me-centered.
Yeah.
This is a little bit too much about me. It's not really a lot about Jesus. So, and also specifically for worship leaders in the multicultural, multi-ethnic context, it's going to take intention. You got to do the work. You got to do the work. You got to push past the normal, and you have to seek out what the Lord is saying for your people. And I think that comes with just a real, maybe just a refresher about what your position is, like what you're called for. Like, especially if you're over the worship department, if you're over the worship culture at your church, everything is discipleship. Like you just said, everything is discipleship. And we teach people a lot through our songs.
Yeah.
And so we got to be careful, and you got to be intentional about that. It's no shade to like Mav City or anything like that, but there was like one Mav City song that was like going ham. It was a great song. We never sang it.
It just didn't fit the content.
It didn't fit. Like, I was like, why would I sing that? Why we don't need that's not something that we're singing right now.
Yeah.
Like, just and like, if you don't have that pulse on your department, well, I mean, you know, some people, you might not just be engaged in the church life like that, but if you are, you need to have a pulse on what's going on in your church. And so it was a crazy song. We never got to it. And somebody asked us like, why we never sang that? And I was like, it just wasn't for us.
That's good, man.
It wasn't for us. And it was a very popular song. And if we would have sang it, people would have loved it.
It would have went crazy, yeah.
But it wasn't for us. Wow. And it might be a year from now, like I might be like, oh, that'd be a great time to sing the song.
Yeah.
But it wasn't for us at the time. And so I went and searched out something that spoke better for you now. For where we are now. And I feel like that's the type of intention that you need to have, because you are discipling people through worship.
So good. So here's my last thing, because here's what I love about you and your work with Anthem Collective, Anthem Church. Like, y'all sing all kind of stuff.
All kinds.
I mean, I consider myself, well, I'm like an ex-worship leader, you know what I mean? I'm still dated. Like, when I got to still go out and do something, like, I notice, like, my songs, they behind, bro. You know, so I got to lean on Shamara and our team to stay current. But I didn't know half the songs we sang, because some of them were probably written. I think you did an original song that day, which was dope. But here's the thing. You all do not lose who you are.
Yeah.
And I want to end with that, because I think that's powerful. Like, so for the black worship leader in the multi-ethnic space, for the white worship leader in the multi-ethnic space, or Asian or Indian or Hispanic, how does one remain who they are? Because you bring a culture, you bring a history.
Absolutely.
How do you remain who you are and yet still bring to the table all these different flavors of music that need to serve a multi-ethnic community without beating them over the head with one form of music? Yeah. Can you help us with that?
For sure. Well, I'll say for sure. Like, I got the answer. I can try. One, I think comparison is a thief. It's a thief. So if you don't have a solid identity, not just for yourself, but maybe the sound of your house, the culture of your house, if you don't have that solidified, you're going to run yourself rampant, comparing yourself to all these other places. So spend some time, and this is like practical stuff, like look at the musicians that you have, look at the skill levels that you have, and find a solid foundation to say, this is our identity, this is who we are. And that's going to take work. You're going to have to spend time with your people. You're going to have to spend time with songs. You're going to have to spend time with your music director if you have one. Like, you need to kind of solidify that, and then find what works well for you. And so don't compare yourself to any other person. And this leads into the next thing is that honest, I'm black and I'm from the South.
Yeah.
So I came with the Cajun, the bump.
Yeah.
Everything's got to feel good to me. Like, that's just my thing.
Yeah.
But I recognize maturity that that's my preference. And that does not diminish any other thing that's not like that. Now, in our culture, again, we kind of take on a little bit of that culture, that identity of like, we want to have fun. We want to feel good. We want to worship, all those things. And so everything that we do is kind of pass through that filter. Pass through that filter. So if there's a song that we think is great, but it's a little easy or lackadaisical, I guess, in arrangement or whatever, we might look at it and go, okay, well, what can we do here?
Because that's
a cultural thing. But I don't look at anything else and go, that's not, like, that's less than. That's less than. And so I think for you to stick with who you are is to not compare yourself to anyone, but just value it for what it is. So that's great. That's not me, though, but that's great. I'm going to stick to what I bring culturally, and we're going to just run it through that. But we're not going to think that we're better than anyone. We're going to stick with what we know, but also be open to progression. If anything opens up, if we feel like God is calling us to a different type of style for a season or whatever, being open, not being secluded in that. And even though I might have my own preference, I am still looking in other spaces that's not my preference and seeing what's great about this. Can we take that and use it? I
saw y'all do that during the pandemic.
Like
y'all messed around with different sonics.
We did.
You could tell you kind of maybe pulled that from another kind of cultural space and said, that was really, really dope.
And so if the mission, which the mission of our church is know Christ and make him known, if we're sticking to mission, whatever your mission is for your music department, if you're sticking to mission, be willing to be open-handed with all these other things. So like right now, I'm looking at traditional services. Like I'm looking at a bunch of Southern Baptist churches who have a 9 a.m. traditional service with an orchestra pit and a grand piano, and I'm going, what makes this great? Like, because obviously some people connect with that. So I'll go, okay. And I don't think that what they doing is better or less than what we do, because we got the lights and the tracks and all of that. So now I'm looking at those services. I'm going, what makes this beautiful? All of it's beautiful to worship, but like, what are the elements that maybe we can bring to our service? Because I'm not about stick with my preference. I'm just about, dang, that was going to be really corny. I was going to say I'm about his presence, but it's the truth.
But it's facts.
I don't put his presence above. I don't put my preference above his presence.
But then as a multi-ethnic church, you're doing the work of finding out what could speak to every other people in this congregation. Which that takes some leadership intentionality, like you've been saying through this podcast. But then that just creates a richer experience for your church, which is one of the reasons why I think Anthem is such a great place, because of that intentionality that you all bring. Look, dude, this was so dope.
It was fun.
Look, Isaac Robinson, everybody. This was, if you're a worship leader, worship pastor, whatever, you've got to lean into what this brother was saying to us today, because I pulled away so much that we need to appropriate. And God is doing a work in multi-ethnic churches through the music, through the leadership, through the discipleship, and we're going to keep pushing together, bro. And I appreciate you taking the time out to hang with me today.
Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, man, we got to have you back.
Oh, I'd love to.
I want to do a panel thing one day with everybody and really get in trouble. You know what I'm saying? But hey, y'all, we appreciate y'all. Till next time, the Gospel and Race Podcast. Peace.